Welcome back, everybody, to the episode 3 of the Positive Adjustments podcast. Really glad to be back with everybody today and back on the show with my great friend, Mr. Mark Skap, founder of the Skap the Appraiser blog and podcast, founder of the 100% Appraiser Facebook group, one of the founders of Appraiser Fest, president of the AGA, Mr. Mark Skap. How are you, buddy?
Busy, good, and ready for a nice little getaway with the wife the next couple days up to this great Smoky Mountains.
That's right. We just talked about this. You're taking off. We talked about it in one of our coaching calls about how important it is to take time out and do stuff with your loved ones, how important family and relationships are above and beyond business.
Yeah, it's bad timing because it's getting busy, but it's still good timing because I'll get to recharge a little bit, get back, and then get right back in the groove and get things going for at least a week and a half before we go down to the Valuation Expo. So then I'll take another couple days off. But you know what? You don't get many opportunities like this. So, I'm just going to do it and have fun with the wife and watch everybody sit there complaining how busy they are.
Yeah, and good for you. And you know what? Another kind of off-topic concept, and we talked about this too in the coaching call, is how compressing your time, it's called Parkinson's law. Work expands and resources expand to fill the time allotted or the space that the resources have available to it. And when you compress the time allotted for something, you tend to get more done. Anytime you're planning a vacation or you're going to go away, you tend to get really organized because your time frame is compressed. You got to get stuff finished, and magically somehow it works out.
Yeah, it's happened before, but there's times that you just have to. You have to force yourself just to get away and recharge and do things. You're busting your butt. It's going to get even busier now. But if you don't take the time for yourself and just keep wearing yourself out, you're going to lose your productivity. You're going to lose a lot more than that. And I'm excited. I can't wait to get up to this cabin, just sit back, look at the mountains, listen to the animals and the birds, and get ready to recharge.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm excited for you guys to be able to enjoy that time. So today's topic, I'm calling it colloquially, everybody is somebody's somebody. We had this chat. In fact, I think it kind of generated out of a post you made, or maybe a comment on one of the social media outlets. And somebody chimed in and made a comment. I think it was a lender, and they made an excellent point. We talk about it all the time, is that everybody is somebody, and there are multiple people in the transactions. And although we use the term client, and we use it very specifically and for a reason, USPAP, the government, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, we have all very clear lines on who a client is in an appraisal transaction. Unfortunately, the negative of that is that I think that has kind of somewhat trained appraisers to think that that's the only person in the transaction that they need to be concerned with. And the reality is, and to the detriment of their business, by the way, the reality is on any appraisal transaction, there might be 4, there might be 6, there might be 8 or 10 different people involved in some aspect of the transaction, whether it be agents on both sides, a couple of different lenders, title people, you name it. There are other people that we might call potential customers involved in that transaction, not to mention the owner of the house or the buyer or the seller or whoever it is. And quite often they kind of get passed over. Would you agree?
Oh, I agree 1,000%. You see it all the time that it's just, here's the client, this is the client, this is the client. And yet you don't realize, you forget, like you said, you just forget that there's a lot other people that are involved in this. And it's kind of just so specific that you just get into that notion and that habit of that's my client, but there's more to it.
Absolutely. And I think it's sadly lost on many appraisers, which is of course why we're talking about it. We hope the right appraisers hear this, in that we are representatives. I have teenage boys. I tell my boys all the time, listen, it's not due to my ego, sons, but understand that when you're out in the world, you are representatives of me and your mother and the family. We, of course, want you to be good citizens of the world, but you have to think beyond yourselves. It's not just you out in the world. You're representing a whole family, a name, a line, a neighborhood, a school, whatever it is. It's not just about you. And I think the message is kind of the same here, is that when we go do our thing, we're doing it for a specific reason, maybe a specific client, a named user, a named client in the report. However, we're representing several industries in this whole package. We're representing the lending industry, we're representing the real estate process and the real estate industry, and all of the complementary services that are kind of feeding this one transaction and are involved. And I think it does us a huge disservice to not be considering that, because when we think about it, when it comes to building a competitive advantage in the appraisal business in 2020, what better way than to be focusing on not just one client, but potentially 5, 6, 8, 10 potential future customers who, if they have a great experience in the whole transaction, may end up calling you in the future. What say you?
I agree. I think as appraisers, we have been trained to name our client, do the work for our client, follow the USPAP guidelines on who our client is. But again, we forget about the other people behind the scenes. So, for instance, you're doing this appraisal for, client A, and you're representing your business. You call the people up, you schedule it, you're out there, but you're doing this for your client. However, you're also representing yourself, you're representing them, you're representing the people that they work with, but you're also forgetting that you're representing the borrower as well. And it's in a different way that you're representing them. You want to represent them in the proper way that, hey, I'm doing this not only just for the client, but I'm doing this for you. I'm giving you my attention. I'm giving you the best service I could possibly give you. Because that client, that borrower could become a potential client down the road just because of the way you acted, the way that you represented yourself, the way you did your job. And it goes further than that. When you start to get maybe a reconsideration request from a lender or from a realtor, you have to remember that you're not just representing that client and representing your business. You could try and get other business as well by representing yourself in the right way. And we forget that. We forget that we should be an extension, or actually, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that the borrower or the realtor or the seller or whoever it is, those people right there should be considered an extension of our client.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, when we say, we can say borrower is anybody who's getting the loan if it's a financing transaction. But buyer specifically, that entails that it's a sales scenario, right? So there's a buyer. What does there have to be if there is a buyer? There has to be a seller. It's the seller's home we're walking into. Now, if we don't treat that seller properly, if we are hands off, just get out of my way. I do this every day. Let me walk through. I'll talk to you if I need to talk to you. Otherwise, please don't talk to me, which I know not every appraiser is like this, but I've met some throughout the years that are that way. In fact, we see sometimes the conversations in the forums where they talk that way. These are all potential parties to future transactions. Do you think these people aren't going to develop some kind of opinion about you and your business? And then, of course, since like you just said, you are an extension of somebody else's business. The seller is looking at the appraiser who came. They don't necessarily know that whole fiduciary relationship that goes on between appraisers and lenders. They tend to think we are hired by the bank and we are an extension of the bank. That's super important. So not only are we working for our named client in the report, we have a fiduciary responsibility too. The buyer is counting on us. The seller is looking at us in a certain way. And then all the spokes of this financing wheel that's trying to make this one transaction come together, they're all sitting, waiting on pins and needles for that appraisal to come back. And of course, everybody has an opinion about how the appraiser handled the scenario, handled the situation, what they did, what they didn't do. Now, what does this, of course, lead to? We all know in the appraisal business, and if you don't know, if you're listening and you don't know how this happens, every now and then, appraisers get some type of request or maybe a revision, but they also sometimes get calls to answer questions. Sometimes those calls come in from the general public. Sometimes those calls come in from real estate agents involved in the transaction. What is the standard response of most appraisers when that happens?
Talk to the client. Talk to your lender. Address it with the lender. That's straightforward. That's what most of them say. I can't speak to you. I can't tell you anything. You'll have to address that with the lender or the client.
And why do they say that?
A, they probably just don't realize or don't know that they can actually do things differently. They're just not informed enough. B, it's probably the easiest way, and the way that they've built a habit of doing this because that's all they know.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that that's how it's just boom, go to the client, go to the client, go to the client. It's like, but you're not helping me.
Yeah, you brought up two great points. I think you're exactly right. I think part of it has come out of maybe Dodd-Frank and the HVCC, the Home Valuation Code of Conduct, where there are some rules about who we can speak to and who we can't, but there's quite often something left out of that. The two words, without permission. Meaning, if the client gives us permission to speak to somebody in the transaction, do we or do we not have permission to speak to them?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if they give you permission, you certainly do.
So the other important point you said is just purely out of habit. And I would absolutely agree that I think some appraisers simply use it as a shield and as a wall. We know that the appraisal industry, much like maybe, and I don't mean to denigrate them, accountants, engineers, certain personality types that are good at or attracted to us, a particular type of job or industry, tend not to be maybe the most communicative. They may have gotten drawn to that industry because they don't like dealing with the general public. They like numbers, they like spreadsheets, they like the math, and they like the research aspect of that business. They don't necessarily want to talk to people all the time. Sometimes that means that they will use that rule without the words without permission. They leave that part off. But they will use that rule as a way to put up a wall and say, can't talk to you. Sorry. Talk to your lender. Well, I can tell you from being in multiple businesses throughout the last 30 years of my life, one of them being the hospitality industry, there is no such thing in business as telling somebody, sorry, can't deal with you, can't talk to you. One of the worst, most damaging things anybody can do in their business. Mm-hmm. It would be the equivalent of going to a restaurant, asking for some food. They bring you your food, and then you say, hey, can I get a little bit of extra ketchup? And they go, sorry, can't talk to you. You got to go talk to the chef or the manager. And you go, but you just brought me my food. Yeah, that's where our relationship ends. Sorry. You got to talk to somebody else if you want extra ketchup. People are going, what kind of place is this? What kind of rule is this? No business does well or succeeds when all they ever do is tell people what they can't do or can't have. So what we would suggest is finding a way to tell people what they can do, have, or what needs to be done. And I'm going to give a little tip in a minute about how to take this to the next level. But do you have any comments on that?
I actually want to share like how I go about things.
Yeah, please.
And it's something that works well for me because it kind of keeps that boundary there, but it also allows me to, offer my help, and it makes them the other party feel engaged. So pretty much at the end of every inspection that I'm at, if I'm there with the realtor or I'm there with the person refinancing a home, I typically don't do this with a seller because they're actually not the ones that are getting the report. But when I'm dealing with a borrower or I'm dealing with a realtor, I'll always tell them at the very end, I'll say, hey, I'm going to get this in. And once I get it in, I'm going to send it to them. They'll send you a copy. Once you get it, look it over. Any questions or comments that you have or anything you need addressed, all my information's on there. Feel free to reach out to me, and I will do the best I can to address your concerns, provided that I can. Because you're not my client, because I'm doing this for the bank or for the lender, I have to get permission from them to speak about certain things. I'm not allowed to give out assignment results. But if there are things that I do not need permission to speak about, I most certainly will address them, or I will have you, write them down, and I will tell you those are valid concerns. please send them to the lender to be addressed so that I have the permission then to address them the proper way. And you know what? I never get any backlash anymore. I used to be the other person and nope, just go to the lender.
Yeah.
But I don't get any backlash. And the people on the other side actually appreciate me taking the time to explain that to them a little bit more in depth so that they're not calling me up frantic, being all crazy, what's going on? No, here's what it is. Do it this way, and then we'll go from there. And it works.
Absolutely, it works. You know why? Because we're all human. People want to be treated with respect and with dignity. And when they don't know something, it's incumbent upon the professional to educate them, bring them up to the same level to the degree you can. And you know what? That solves 99.9.7% of the problems. Because all people really want, although they don't always know how to state their problem or their question, they may think it's one thing. And then you tell them, sorry, I can't deal with you. You're pointing at them like a bad child or a dog. Sorry, go to your room. That's not dignified. It's not treating somebody with respect. And quite often, all they're looking for is an explanation. And when they can get an explanation from somebody who can communicate, somebody who can articulate the rules, the regulations, the boundaries, the things we have to follow, why something might be a certain way, then they feel dignified again. They feel like they've been treated with respect, and now they might have some empathy for the appraiser and the rules that the appraiser is bound by.
This is a big problem within the profession, and we see it in the groups and other places, is where appraisers they give the other person a reason to not like them.
That's right.
They give the profession a bad name of, hey, can't talk to the appraiser. There's a lot of information out there says, oh, I can't talk to the appraiser. I can't do this. But that's not true. You can't give assignment results or give the confidential information to certain people or certain ways without permission. But do you know that most of the calls that I get are, hey, I'm not sure about this because it looks like, you didn't include the basement square footage into the overall GLA or the above grade, or, hey, I think you didn't really count the bathroom that was in the basement. And it's so simple to explain, to say, no, it's in there in the grid. This is where it is. This is how I did it. This is how it's separated. And it's done. And you took the time. It's very quick. And it alleviates many more headaches going forward, because it was a simple communication between two humans, so easily taken care of, than saying, sorry, can't talk to you, talk to the lender or address it with them. Then it comes in your email, a day later. And guess what? Now you're bitching to everybody. Man, I got this request from them to reconsider this because the agent didn't realize how to read the report or understand this. Okay, pick your poison. What's going to be easier for you to handle?
Yeah, pick your battles. You're absolutely right. And sometimes I think appraisers struggle to pick the correct battles, and they can't have it both ways. So let's talk about, we do something in my organization. We have something called a customer and a client service bill of rights. And what that simply is how we're going to treat customers, how we're going to develop a competitive advantage. And one of the documents in there is something called a never always list. I'm going to talk about this actually in an upcoming podcast. It'll be out tomorrow. But a never always list is just as it sounds. Never do this, always do this. And they usually go hand in hand, these two statements. So I'll give you an example. We said it earlier. Never tell a customer or client what you can't do. Always phrase it or state it in what you can do. So instead of saying, I'm sorry, I can't do that, always phrase it in, here's what I can do. Now, in that instance, it's okay to say can't as long as you follow it up with the can. I'm really sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner. I can't do that for you at this point, but here's what I can do. And then we follow it up with a can. Another thing in our never always list, this one's called never point, always show. And what never point, always show means is we never point somebody somewhere else away from our business. We always show them, take them by the hand where they need to be. And an example would be somebody calling and saying, hey, I have some questions about this. And then we violate rule number 1 and we go, sorry, I can't talk to you. And we don't follow it up with an always. They just did a never. Never say can't. And then we say, but here's what you can do. You can call your lender. Take care of it yourself. Now these people feel helpless. Well, what do you mean? They didn't do the appraisal, you did. Now you're telling me I got to go somewhere else? We all know what it feels like to get the runaround. So our never point, always show rule means never tell somebody, you got to go down the street to get the information you're looking for. We always say something like, I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you, but here's what I can do for you. Let me do this. I don't mind. And if you want to write this script down, write it. I'm just going off the top of my head, but we use it all the time. We actually have a written script for this. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I'm so sorry. I'm not able to answer that question for you right now because we have some fairly strict guidelines and rules that we have to follow. But here's what I'd be happy to do. And we always say, I don't mind. I'd be happy to do it with you right now. Usually they're on the phone when we say this. While I have you on the phone, why don't I email your lender, my client, if that's the scenario, that's the situation, and I would be happy to ask them for permission to be able to discuss this with you because I'd sure love to solve your problem. And then, of course, if I have the email address or I have a contact at that lender, I will say it. And then I will ask the person on the other end of the line or our staff will, would you mind if I have your email address? I will CC you on the email. So while the person is on the phone with us, we're taking them by the hand and we're walking them through the process. We're not pointing them in another direction, giving them the runaround. We're taking them by the hand and we're showing them, here's what we can do. Now, what message does this send right away? Well, it sends the message that, hey, we do have some rules we have to follow. We're very careful about that, and we're really taking care of our client. We can't just go off and start talking about things that we can't talk about without permission. But here's what we're willing to do. We don't mind. We'd be happy to get them on the line, email them, carbon copy you while you're right here on the phone with us, and see if we can get permission. Now, I'll tell you after doing this for about 12 years that 95% of the time, you have a time delay. You're going to send an email, and then you're going to sit and wait. And we always hang up with the client. We say, well, we've sent off the email. Now all we have to do is wait. Are there any specific questions that you want to give to me right now? I'll tell you if I can answer them or if I can't, but I'll do my best to answer the ones that I can while I'm with you. Now, many times, like you just said, you will answer all the questions that you can, and those will be the big ones that they want solved. Mm-hmm. And where there are specific questions that you can't answer without permission, eventually you will get permission. Haven't met a client yet that would beg the appraiser to solve this problem so that they don't have to. I'm not saying they're not out there, and I know many appraisers who deal with AMCs, and it might be impossible to get to somebody who can give them permission to have that conversation. But taking the steps and the action to take the customer by the hand and say, here's what, I'd be happy to do this for you. It at least takes the monkey off your back and puts it somewhere else. Now, if the client, the AMC, the lender, somebody else doesn't get back with you ever, the person's CC'd on it. They can see that you are doing your due diligence, you're taking the actions to solve their problem, but your hands are tied. And you've told them, my hands are tied, but I'm willing to bend over backwards and do whatever I can to solve this problem. I just need permission.
You know, to take it a little bit further is I would personally rather have them call me and address their concerns to me and have me tell them, hey, I can't speak about that, or I can't, do this, say this or whatever. I'm not allowed to per, guidelines, and I'll answer these questions because now I'm getting it from them. And I kind of can feel a little bit if they're angry, if they're just confused, kind of get a little bit more of the human factor and then just telling them to go to their lender. Then the lender comes back with a lengthy email that's just, or something written out by them. It just seems a little bit more professional, but it also makes you look more professional. Like you actually care, not just about doing your job, but you actually care about them as well and their concerns. Yes, there's laws, there's regulations, there's things we have to follow. That's just pure and simple. That's what it is. However, it can be addressed like you do or how I do at the very end of my inspections. If you just address it that way, you're leaving them with something for me, leaving them at the very end of the inspection, I'm leaving them with something in their head saying, wow, okay, we can get a hold of him if we have any problems. He's telling us to do that and he'll discuss what he can and what he can't. That's great. Instead of just, hey, see you, gotta go, goodbye, slam the door. And then when they do have a problem, I'm not going to answer that email or I don't want to deal with you. I think it's just easier to take that phone call, no matter how angry they are or whatever they want to talk about. Not only can you now start writing your notes down for your file and everything that's going on here, so you're prepared, but you also get a feeling, and you probably could cut off a lot of the other little bullshit things that don't really matter, and they're not going to matter when they go to the lender anyway. But you seem a little more human, and like you do care about these other people. You just don't know those. It's all these little things that can lead to future business. Maybe not just by the lender, or they tell the lender, hey, this person was great job by them. Now you maybe get more work from that lender. You don't know what they're saying behind the scenes and who they're going to refer you to. I've actually had a scenario where I did an appraisal for somebody, answered a bunch of their questions, and told them I could not answer some of these other ones. They'd have to do it a certain way. They actually referred me to their next door neighbor because they were impressed with how I did things. Well, it's the little things you just don't know about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the little things. It's the little things that pull us out of commoditization and into the realm of top quality customer and client service. If you're not doing those things, understand you are a commodity. Every industry can be commoditized, which means boiled down to its lowest common denominator, and then you better be the lowest price. Because if you're not the lowest price, you're pushed out of business. If you're tired of fighting for fees and you're tired of fighting over being lowest price wins, then you better have something else in your quiver to beat the market, so to speak, to have a competitive advantage and edge in the market. And one of those things, it's not more appraisal knowledge, although we always recommend that appraisers be as well-trained and educated and knowledgeable as they can be. It's having a competitive edge when it comes to delivering the kind of experience that customers and clients are getting from other places in the market. Understand, when they hang up with you, they don't have another appraiser come to their house. No, they live their lives. They go to the laundromat, they go to the grocery store, they go out to dinner. They're having all kinds of other customer service experiences. So where do you want your customer service interaction to stand out in their day, week, or month? As one of the worst or as one of the best? That's an important point to remember. They're not competing. You're not competing against other appraisers. You're competing against every other business that they interact with on every single day, week, and month.
Think about it this way. If people are giving reviews out there and they give a 5-star review to that lender, they give a 5-star review to that realtor, they give a 5-star review to that title company, and forget you as the appraiser because you just were in and out, you're going to be angry if you saw that and said, wait, what about me? What didn't I do my job? Wasn't I great? Didn't I do everything perfect? The loan closed, but you didn't get your review. But how great would it feel if you saw all those other reviews and then saw underneath of that as well, or they gave you a review on your page? Hey, he was very helpful. He did this, all in that one transaction. You're going to feel great. You're going to feel wonderful that you did your job, but you did it better. You helped them, and you got that great review. You will get reviews, not just from private work. You will get reviews from bank jobs as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the example you gave is probably best case scenario because it's neutral. They said, lender did a great job, agent did a great job, title company did a great job, pest inspection, great job, and they leave you out. Fine, we call that neutral. What would be worse? They go, every part of this transaction was stellar. That shitty appraiser kind of put a little nick in this whole experience for us. But you know what? Everybody else made up for it. Well, that would be worst case scenario, is where you actually get called out because you were the worst part of the transaction. And every appraiser thinks when they hear this, yeah, Blaine, well, that's just a necessary evil that sometimes we deal with because sometimes appraisers disappoint people in a transaction, meaning we can't come in at a particular value. Let me reassure every appraiser out there, get that out of your head right now, because not everybody cares about you hitting their value. What they care about is being educated on the process. And when you can adequately articulate and educate them on the process, quite often what their initial concern was, you didn't hit my value. You educate them on what the real concern was. And they go, you know what? I never thought about it that way. I appreciate you taking the time to explain that whole process. It makes it clear to me now why you hitting a particular value, you just weren't able to, and how we might be able to keep this whole deal together anyway.
Just think that when you're doing this, that your actions and the way you handle things will be reflected not just on the people that you're talking to, but it will trickle down. That borrower will tell that realtor they're dealing with that you were terrible and you didn't talk to them or whatever, or that realtor is going to go tell that lender, wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't do this. They're going to make you sound to be like this evil ogre appraiser out there. But if you can kind of cut that off and just handle it a little bit differently, as we've talked about, you might be surprised to see that even if somebody's still mad at you, they're not going to be as mad as you at you. You know, it's going to be different, but you still may have that lender that still loves you for what you've done, and borrower. It's just a different way of looking at things.
Absolutely. And the last point on this, everybody keep in mind, we know how the world works today. We live in the 21st century. We are a social media world. We are a world driven by Google reviews, Yelp reviews, Travelocity review, all the reviews. We count on them on a daily basis, not for our business, to make decisions on where we want to eat, where we want to shop, and where we want to travel. So understand, back in the day, when somebody was upset with a service, they told 5, 6, 7 friends. They vented a little bit. Maybe those people told a few more people. If they were happy with their service, they might tell 3, 4, 5 people. But it kind of withered out after a while. Now they're unhappy with a service. They go straight to the internet. They go straight to potentially thousands, tens of thousands, and millions of people. And they talk about their experience. And so that people like you and I, it's democratized business. People like you and I can go to the internet and find out, is this a good lender? Is this a good agent? Is this a good travel company? Is this a good appraiser? So we have to be conscious of what it's going to take to develop a competitive advantage in 2020 in the age of the internet.
I agree with you. I mean, my last thought is, you know what? Take what we say here, try it. If it works for you, great. If you choose not to, well, then that's on you, and that's okay as well. We're not here to try and change you or anything. We're just trying to offer some positive insight on maybe some other different ways to think about things and do things. So if try it, works. If it doesn't, oh well.
Go make some positive adjustments.
You got it. Same there.
Fist bump, brother. Talk soon.
You got it.